the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
PBS, this just in. An entire battalion of weaponized misogynists will be descending on hapless Chicago to forcefully fondle the city's innocence. With them are notorious fascist pug handler Count Dankula, rape joke enabler Sargon of Akkad, alt-right menace Mr. Reagan, Satan himself Paul Elam, and the devil's handmaid Karen Swan. We have just received word from an expert in hateology that if you even so much as look upon this conference, your eyes will be burned out of your skull, your tongue will invert, and your anus will seethe from the union. We repeat, do not so much as glance at this convention and its related paraphernalia of evil.
Hello everybody and welcome to Honey Badger Radio. This is the, well...
What is this?
My name is Brian, I'm here with my wife Lindsey, and it's just us. I hope the fan isn't too loud. It's really, really hot today in Chicago. Like, brutally hot. And this is a Dogezerker. I'm calling it a Dogezerker instead of a Rantzerker because I don't want to mislead anyone into thinking that Karen or Alison is around, because they're not. Alison is essentially like eyeballs deep in ICMI stuff, and she's not going to be doing shows very often. And Karen is also really busy with doing her thing. So because content has to be put out on HBR, otherwise there is no HBR, I am here to do a video.
That sounds like this is going to be like low quality.
No, I don't think it is, but I don't want to give anybody any false... So anyway, Dogezerker number 113, coming to you live from a hot as fuck Chicagoland area. You know, that we are the survivors of the alt-right apocalypse, etc., etc. So first off, do we sound okay? We're sharing the microphone, and I have it pointed more at Lindsey than myself because I'm Puerto Rican and we talk loud, and she's a lot more soft-spoken. So it is a low-quality video. I can't get it over 144p. Well, I don't know what to tell you because it's not my internet. It's not my internet. All right. Well, anyway, speaking of low-quality videos, no. I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to say that. So what we're doing today is I was wanting to respond. There's a number of things I want to respond to in my lifetime, but what I want to respond to today is part 2 of Big Joel's 2-video response, review, analysis, breakdown, deep dive, whatever you want to call it, into Cassie Jaye's The Red Pill. It's a series of 2 videos he made called The Red Pill, The Strange Art of Men's Rights Activism. Big Joel is a YouTuber with about 162,000 subscribers, and he makes a lot of videos that analyze media for various reasons. He made one about Twilight Zone that I actually liked. I think the general quality of his videos is decent, and he probably deserves the following on that basis. Is Big Joel considered part of BreadTube? I don't know if he's considered part of BreadTube. I think that might be a technical... That might be like a specific part of YouTube. I don't want to assume anything. But
it wouldn't surprise me. Yeah, based on his arguments, I don't think it would be too much of a stretch for me to say that Big Joel is on the left and believes that... What? He like talks about how capitalism is bad just in this. Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying. It's not a stretch to say. You know, look. We need communism. Comrade. Yeah, no. Here, let me just tell you why I said in the description. I said join Brian and Lindsey as we go through Big Joel's second response to Cassie Jaye's The Red Pill while being as courteous and respectful as humanly possible. So the reason is because I think that I'm gonna try this. Not to get too, well, I mean, like, if you get emotional, it's okay, because you're a woman. But I'm going to try not to get all bent out of shape, because I think that one of the tools that serves Big Joel very well in his videos is how nice he sounds while he's responding, right? His tone is very, like, Barack Obama. And I'm going to try for the same in terms of my response to it. So if you guys this is what we're going to do. We're going to look at part 2. This video is about a half an hour long, the one we're responding to. But fortunately, Lindsey and I aren't too verbose. I might be a little bit verbose, but we're not too verbose on that. So I'm going to apply some filters here so that we don't have any, we're less likely to get a copyright strike. And I'm going to ask Big Joel, if you happen to see this, please don't hit us with a copyright strike. I assume that your video was created with the intention of creating a dialogue, and so I am basically joining in the dialogue. So that is, I am trying to do this in as good, let's say, in good faith, in the hopes that you'll be very cool. So.
Oh, one thing I want to say too is Bane66 did a video.
Yes,
too,
he responded
right?
he responded to part 1
okay.
recently, but we also responded to part 1 about 3 months ago. Something like that. We were doing a fundraiser for Hannah, and we did a response. I included a link to the response we did to part 1 of his video in the low bar if you guys want to check it out. Again, I don't know if he's on BreadTube, but I know that he is highly likely a leftist, and that's fine. Like, that's fine. Because I know, and I'm a little conflicted on this, but I know there are MRAs that are on the left, and they think that those things are compatible. And I'm open to that argument. I used to believe that. I used to think that the men's issues is a nonpartisan thing, but I'm starting to wonder, honestly. Like making these videos, trying to respond to people about this stuff gets pretty exhausting, and let's just get into the video. So, okay. Anyway, if you guys want to send a super chat or contribute to the conversation, please do so. I'm going to play segments of the video. We're going to go through as much as possible. I have to get done in an hour because we have to do an after show that's about an hour, and then I have to go into a meeting. If I go over on the main show, then the after show is going to be shorter. I'll say that much, but I can't go longer than 2 hours. So, with that said, let's see what Big Joel has to say. Part 2 of The Red Pill, The Strange Art of Men's Rights Activism.
Hey everybody, this is the second part of a two-parter about the Red Pill. If you haven't seen the first vid, I would highly recommend watching that one first. I mean, you do you, but if it were me, I'd watch that one first. Rather than providing a recap of the last video or reintroducing the film, I just want to jump straight into it. Ideas that I talked about in part 1 will resurface as they become useful. Around the 40-minute mark, The Red Pill has a tone shift. The introduction to the film is mostly concerned with the unfair treatment of men in labor, but
just pausing for the banana there. I don't think it's necessary, but I'm just doing it anyway to be on the safe side, so.
After this point, the film wants to make another big argument, that men are routinely oppressed when it comes to domestic and reproductive stuff. One of the points the film makes here is a good one. Even as there seems to be a movement in a more egalitarian direction, the family court system is still biased against men and continues to see mothers as the de facto better parent.
After 14 years, my body gave out. I got sicker than I've ever been. I realized I'm going to die. That's not going to do anybody good. I've got to give up the fight. So I gave up custody. And so I don't see my son anymore. He hasn't been in my house since.
Oh, okay. I just want to pause here. This is a thing that I've seen Big Joel do and lots of other people who are opposing men's rights talking points. And I know that Bane pointed this out, and I know that we pointed this out in the first video that we made. Joel sets up the framework that the men's rights movement is trying to make the case that men are the ones that are actually oppressed, or that the men are the one that actually don't have any power. I want to say that that is a misrepresentation of what MRAs say. I've never heard an MRA say men are actually oppressed. I've only heard the narrative that women are the oppressed class and that men are the oppressor class is false. And that if there is oppression that goes on, it's not gendered oppression. It's usually based on different systems, and it doesn't really happen in the West, really. Or it might happen on some individual basis, but it's not a gendered thing. So MRAs are not claiming that men are actually the ones oppressed and that women are actually the ones that have power over them. And I find it interesting that that is the de facto go-to position that feminists and leftists assume that MRAs take, because it kind of sounds like kind of terrifying. Do you know what I'm saying?
What? Sorry,
Well,
I don't know what you mean by.
It sounds kind of scary because it works from the, if you're working from the assumption that you're trying to make the case, you're trying to build up what you believe the MRA position is, and you believe the MRA position is, oh, men are the ones that are oppressed and women are the oppressors, right? And feminism is the oppression. It's got power, and that men, they don't have power. Women have power. The reason why it's a little bit frightening is because it shows that the people who are saying that, even though that's obviously not true, they only see this in terms of who has power and who doesn't.
Oh.
It's like when Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez says, I'm the boss. You can't, like, you guys are screaming from the cheap seats, right? It sounds like a throwaway line. But when you're in politics and you're seeing it in terms of who has power and who doesn't have power, as opposed to what is my responsibility to my constituents, which is what positions of power, or what they call power, should be, how they should be framed. They are positions of responsibility. When you don't acknowledge that, I think that's scary, because that means that they only see things in terms of power structures, which I know that is how the left tends to look at things, instead of seeing it more like maybe MRAs, and they're not, but maybe MRAs aren't saying that they're the ones oppressed and that women are the oppressors, but they're saying men have problems too. And feminists have no interest in addressing them.
I was wondering about this too. Like is the red pill more of approach to men's issues as a response to feminism, or is it more of like a blank slate? Okay, let's look at men's issues. And I think it's a response to feminism.
I think it's a response to feminism. Yeah.
So like I think that's why he's almost like judging the red pill for not being like starting from a blank.
When you say the red pill, do you mean the movie, or do you mean?
Sorry, I mean the movie.
Oh, okay. Well, I think but the thing is that how else can you possibly look at it? Because this is the thing.
Well, this is something that I've been wondering, is like, most of what I understand men's issues to be is in response to feminism, right? It's like almost 100% in response to feminism, because they're looking at one side, the female side, so it's like, hey, look at the male side, and that is exactly what Cassie Jaye's movie is doing, right? It's like, look at the male side, but he's criticizing it by just looking at the male side and being like, well, are you
doing a Kathy Newman? So what you're saying is
that men are oppressed.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to get too ahead of what's going on here, but I wanted to first mention that this comes up a lot, not only in Big Joel's video, but in lots of videos trying to address the MRAs, or the MRM, and they always do it in terms of MRAs say that men are actually the ones that are oppressed. I want you to show me or tell me any MRA anywhere that has said men are actually oppressed and women are the oppressors. I've never heard that. Saying that men have problems does not mean men are oppressed. Saying that men have problems that society either doesn't want to see or doesn't want to talk about, or there are people that are politically active that are looking to suppress discussion about those problems. See, what's her name that laughed at laughed at Philip Davies when he brought up male suicide. What's her name that Sargon wouldn't rape? Jess Phillips. She laughed at that, right? That's an example. That's an example of what we're talking about. That you bring up something serious and you say, can we talk about men's issues today? And then she scoffs at that. And she's a powerful politician, okay? And she scoffs at that and says, every day you can talk about men's issues. Like this throwaway thing, while simultaneously being unaware of the fact that she's literally dismissing discussion about men's issues at that moment. That's important to bring up. I'm sorry, what were you going to say?
I don't remember. we can keep going.
All right, we'll keep going. I'm sure we'll have other things to say.
Interestingly enough, though, the film doesn't really center on this issue. After a survey of the family court problem, the movie begins to focus on a more general claim, that once a man impregnates a woman, or is told that he impregnated a woman, he loses all power. The power to abort, the power to keep the kid rather than put it up for adoption, the power to know if the kid is his, and yes, the power to have custody.
Okay, I'm just stopping it there to remind you guys what I said. Do you notice that Big Joel uses the word power to describe a situation that is not really so much about power, it's about options, it's about choices. It's not about power. Like this idea that men, he says men don't have any power in, when dealing with a woman's fertility or his children or custody, that kind of thing. It's not about power. Is not the right word, I don't think, but it seems to be one that he likes to use, and I wonder why that is. And look,
to be fair, he actually uses choices though in a criticism.
He does later,
he doesn't
but
always use power.
I know, but why would you use power in the context of describing men's options?
Because he thinks that's what Cassie Jaye is setting up. So I mean, it's assumption on his part.
But like, okay, it is a bit of an assumption on his part, but I don't like. I'm wondering. Look, I'm not the smartest MRA, okay? Like, I just like to ask questions. I'm a curious type. I just want to try to dive deeper into this. But when that language just sets off alarm bells for me, when somebody starts using the word power, when I don't think power is the right word, I think choice is the word. It's about when a woman becomes pregnant, to what degree do men have any, not just let's say options, but also responsibilities. What responsibilities do women have? Like what happens next? What are the options? I mean, one could argue that options are power, but options are power, but power is not always options. Power, I don't know if you understand what I mean. Maybe I'm just nitpicking, so I apologize. If Joel's watching this, this is off the cuff. I'm not doing it, I don't have anything written up. I'm just observing the language that's being used, but just, whatever. Let me know what you guys think. I'm going to keep going.
This whole section of the movie is kinda strange. Like, in part 1, I talked about how the film structured its first set of arguments. First, it presented a legitimate problem. Second, it used that problem to further the narrative that men have it worse than women do. And third, it presented that point in such a way as to make it seem like the left and feminism couldn't care less about the issues men face.
Again, we're going into this idea that he says men have it worse than women. MRAs aren't saying that. They're saying men also have issues. And it seems like if you bring up that men have issues as well, it seems to diminish everyone's issues. But it's just men also have issues. None of this is untrue. So, anyway, moving on.
And that structure, on the face of it, was a problem. It was unnecessarily reductive and was divisive, and I don't think it led to very productive conclusions. But there was something concrete there, right? A sense that there was a clear angle to the argument. Compared to the first section of the film, this part about paternal disempowerment feels a lot less pointed, a lot more complicated, and ultimately, a whole lot weirder. Around this time, the movie stops really caring about systematic issues or oppressions. Instead, it starts to use anecdotes and sentimentality to evoke the feeling that some great injustice has been done, regardless of whether one has or hasn't. Let's look at some examples.
I'm just pausing here. Do you have any thoughts on that so far, or do you want to wait until later?
I'll wait.
Okay. So he says that they move away from statistics, systematic things, and they move into some anecdotes. Now, this is, I guess, more of a criticism of Cassie Jaye's filmmaking style. She likes to do the stories because the fact is, and this is unfortunate, you can do a movie that's all just statistics, but I think Cassie Jaye's audience is people like herself. And I think that Cassie Jaye believes that stories of individual experiences are effective on people like herself. Is that a fair thing to say, you think? Like, stories evoke emotion, and maybe that's what she's going for.
Yeah, I think the fact that the documentary like kind of follows her and her like feelings on everything and how she shifts, it's probably more appealing to women especially. Which I think if you want anyone to understand men's issues and have a bit more empathy, it's women. So
yeah. Okay, so let's keep going.
First, we have a story from Harry Crouch about a woman who knowingly had 5 kids with a man who wasn't her husband. He tells this story with a lot of gravity, like, see how big a problem paternity fraud is? It ruined this family.
Like a situation in Texas, where the family had 5 little towhead kids, all guys, all little blondos. And all of a sudden, one day, one of the little blondo kids gets in trouble, has to go to the hospital. They can't get a hold of mom, they get a hold of dad. Dad rushes to the hospital, needs to give blood. Whoops. Can't do it. Wrong blood. What? All the kids look alike. Turns out it was the guy down the street.
You've heard of this case?
No, it's a real case. How do you think it feels? I mean, it's horrific. Horrific. That's not wrongful, that's deliberate.
So that's paternity fraud.
That's paternity fraud.
She knew who the father was.
And, you know, paternity fraud is a really complicated topic. In the 90s, before DNA testing became widely available, if you were recognized as the child's father, there wasn't much you could do to get out of your parental obligation. But since then, things have been rapidly changing. Every state I've looked at has made it possible for a man to contest paternity, even if he indicated that he was the father at some point. Even Nebraska and Florida, 2 states that dragged their feet on paternity testing, both reversed their decisions and allowed DNA to decide fatherhood in courts. Now, it is true that if you raise the...
So, I just want to say that, Harry Crouch was bringing that up to, like, he's like, how would that feel? Like, he said that. The whole point is have empathy for this thing that can happen, paternity fraud.
Yes.
And I actually think it's more common than Big Joel makes it sound like it is. I think it actually, I think I saw a paper or something that was saying that it's way more common than we think it is.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And also, the thing is that, you know, like you said, the point of, I think, Cassie Jaye's film isn't to necessarily hit a home run and just get all the changes done. Documentaries don't do that. They tend to start conversations about it. They tend to raise awareness about it. And the point that should be made here is that even though that case that Harry Crouch is discussing is just an anecdote, the fact is it is exposing a system that allows that to happen. And even if things are improving, which is great, it doesn't mean that paternity fraud is suddenly okay, or it shouldn't be treated as like it shouldn't be dismissed, right? Like
you know, it is interesting because that is a uniquely male issue. Women don't have maternity fraud unless their child is stolen at the hospital or something.
Right.
Like that's something unique to the male experience.
Right. Exactly.
They can experience paternity fraud.
Yes. And I think it's basically like there's it's dismissive.
It is dismissive.
It's dismissive to just say, you know, well, it's just like this weird thing that happens, and I don't see how. I think he says something like, I don't see how this is a men's issue or something like that. But let's keep going.
The non-bio kid is your own for a time. Many courts will be less likely to sever your child support burden. You'll probably need proof of fraud, and you'll definitely need proof that you immediately cut off ties to the kid when you realized it wasn't yours. But this stuff is a strange balancing act for everybody involved. Fathers have to balance their concern and affection for the kid against the weight of their financial burden. And courts have to negotiate between fathers' rights and the best interests of the child. It's a nuanced system, and to look at it and say definitively that men are put under attack by it seems a bit misleading. That said,
what? I don't understand, like, what is it?
Well, I think that this is the thing that I've noticed. It's a recurring theme in his video responses. when a genuine issue that faces men or fathers comes up that is irrefutable, he seems to like basically go in and say, yeah, but there's a lot of nuance there. It's like creating a bunch of nuance where everyone knows that this is a complicated issue, but we're trying to draw attention to the fact that here is a thing that impacts men, specifically fathers. All right. And I saw, you guys might remember, last week, Friday, I had Dion, Devil's Advocate, on. He is in a custody battle. He hasn't seen his son in 3 months, and he's suicidal because of it. And there, it's like, I want to say it's like the 9th or 10th on the list of reasons why men commit suicide is that they don't have access to their kids. Now, perhaps Big Joel might say something like, in some ways, men might be responsible for their own inability to see their kids. This is another thing I hear a lot of feminists say. And this is the reason, one of the core reasons why feminism and men's activism can't work together, because feminism always works from the assumption that men have power and women don't have power. And that makes men less sympathetic right off the bat. So it's just more difficult to talk about their issues. And we can't start talking about men's issues without removing feminism from the equation. What were you going to say?
Well, I did some notes before with like watching the video before, and I did clue into this sentence. It's just like, it's kind of like I don't know. It's like very indirect language, okay? I'll read it to you again, okay?
All right.
It's a nuanced system, and to look at it and say definitively men are put under attack by it seems a bit misleading. So, like, can you say something directly? Like, it's so passive. Like, I
that's what I'm saying. It's basically just saying, well, you can't just say that. It's like, yes, we can. Like, we have examples. But like you said, literally, like wrongful paternity and paternity fraud are things that uniquely impact men and can only impact men. And there's another movie that Big Joel could go watch. Maybe you should. It's called Divorce Corps, Corpse, CORPS, I believe. And it goes into the issues with the divorce system. You can talk to divorced men and find out like what their experiences were. I'm telling you, there is a bias in the court system against men in favor of women. Women are the default parents in most cases. And I think that we could say that that could be a problem. And I'm being as charitable as possible by saying that, okay? I think that that should be considered. Okay. So anyway, is there anything else before I keep going?
No, well, that's it. It's just like it's
a
nothing.
It's a
burger.
non-statement.
Like,
yeah.
Of course, everything's nuanced in this.
Sure. No one's trying to say it's simple. But like you only have an hour and a half to make a point in your documentary. Like you can't go into all the nuance of every single issue. It's just not possible.
Well, and in this case, like, what are we saying? That women are conspiring against men to, like, have kids that aren't theirs? I mean, nobody thinks that.
No, nobody thinks that.
Like, men aren't under attack by women conspiring.
No, not as a
other
collective.
Men or something. I don't even,
no.
Like, I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know what he means.
And we're saying women, not feminists. That's a different thing. Don't conflate them. Okay, let's keep going.
Harry Crouch isn't really talking about any of this stuff, is he? The story he tells doesn't refer back to problems with paternity fraud legislation or to problems with government in general. It's just a story about a mean adulterer and her sad husband. There's really nothing we can say about the incident besides...
Well, I think that it's implicit in the discussion about paternity fraud that there's an issue with the system. So, yes, he doesn't have to go into all that. Plus, if you want, you can go to Cassie Jaye's YouTube channel and look for extended interviews. I believe there's an extended interview with Harry Crouch. I don't know if he goes into all that, but you know, he only answers the questions that Cassie Jaye asks. But it's implicit in this that there is a problem with the system.
Yeah.
So he doesn't need to go out of his way to criticize the system when it's kind of obvious.
Yeah, but I don't even think you have to criticize the system per se. It's just like pointing out something that happens to men.
Yeah, there is that too. But I mean, the thing is though, on top of that, there are a couple points being made. Okay, one, women are capable of doing this stuff. That's not a controversial thing to say. Two, men are impacted by this stuff. And three, there is the law and the government support women in general to allow them, and if not enable them, to do this stuff to men. That's it. I'm not saying that's oppression. I don't want to call it that. It's not important. But that's it. That's what's happening. It's that simple. I say that with all due politeness. Okay.
Sorry the bad thing happened. Wish your wife hadn't done that.
Can you fathom what happens to this family? How do you think the kids feel when they find out their old dad isn't their old dad and is the guy down the street? How do you think dad feels?
Or look here, where Jaye shows us an article about a guy in South Carolina whose kid was adopted out without his consent.
I started to research some father's rights issues and came across some harrowing stories. Like this man in South Carolina who found out his only daughter was adopted away by the mother without his knowledge or consent.
His daughter was with an adoptive family in California, so he began his fight to get his daughter back.
I looked into the article and it's pretty nuts. Apparently there's still a law on South Carolina's books from back when miscegenation was illegal. It says that if a child is mixed race, you're allowed to put them up for adoption outside of state lines and without the father's consent. And the girlfriend's mom used this racist loophole to do just that. Yeesh. There's two things I'd like to point out about this story.
Alright, there's one thing I want to point out about this story. That was a pivot, in my opinion. So, Big Joel is shifting this away from a men's issue and making it into a race issue by saying that they're using this old, racist law that was on the books in Carolina, in the Carolinas or whatever, to allow the mother to get away with this. But you see, we here in the MRM, Joel, if you're watching, we don't care about race. We care about men. We care about black men. We care about white men. We care about Indian men, Native American men. It doesn't matter. Men, gay men, trans women, trans men. It doesn't matter. I don't know, trans men? Trans women, at least. Well,
trans men, exclusionary MRA.
I mean, we care about everybody, but like when we're talking about the issues facing men, it doesn't get subdivided into race stuff. It's just men. And the fact that this woman was able to use that law against the man is a statement that, yeah, maybe that law shouldn't still be on the books, but this isn't a race issue. This is a male issue. This affected a man. And I don't know why. Well, I guess that I could get into, there is a possibility to know why the left wants to pivot to race or sexuality or religion or nationality or ethnicity.
He's just dismissing all of these points. Like, he's like, oh yeah, these are good points. Let's dismiss them with something else.
Yeah.
Like, he does it for the next.
Make it about race. And it's like,
too.
But it's still a man, dude.
He's like, all of these are just freak accidents.
I think that when you pivot to race stuff, you erase the male in this equation. So I don't know. I'm gonna move on, but let's keep going.
First, it's obviously not representative of America's general disposition toward adoption. Like, random, archaic miscegenation laws are not usually exploited to prevent a father from keeping his kid. That's called a freak accident, right? Second, the guy got his kid back. Yeah, the movie doesn't mention it, but the father went to court and was able to reclaim his daughter. These two facts make it impossible for us to look at this story and see a broad societal problem. It's just a weird, awful story about a guy temporarily getting screwed over. Nothing more, nothing less.
So we should ignore it? And what if this happened to a woman, that she didn't get access to her children?
Then it would be a problem?
Even if it was for a couple years and then she got him back. It's no big deal, right?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, like, maybe Cassie Jaye chose a bad story as an example. But even if that is a bad example, even if, and I'm going to be as charitable as possible again, that doesn't dismiss the movie as a whole. It just is a bad example, perhaps.
Well, maybe, and then maybe like he didn't get his kids back until she released the movie, right? Or like was in the process of.
Well, there is that because
making the movie.
Yeah,
right?
because Cassie Jaye. Well, there's another story.
But look, even if you were separated from your child that you wanted to be with for like a year or two, it's still pretty bad. I mean, like, is that just you can just dismiss that because he got his kid back?
Yeah, how long did it take for him to get his kid back?
Yeah, and how much stress and
fighting,
and
how much did it cost him? I mean, you know, and look, it's one person and it's a bit obscure, but I don't think that it's like I don't think that that's the story that people should be walking away from. Like took that wasn't necessarily the takeaway from the movie. And I'm saying even in the most charitable light I could put it, if it turned out that that was just a bad story for Cassie Jaye to take, that doesn't dismiss the movie as a whole, nor does it mean that that's not still an issue, right? That we shouldn't say, I don't know, like that we shouldn't like look at this with compassion for the man, because that's what we're trying to focus on. So anyway, I'm gonna keep going.
In every state, a father can prevent his child's adoption if he demonstrates that he wants to help raise the kid. And there are occasionally major glitches in that system that can cause a lot of damage. That's what happened in this story, and in the next one Jaye shows.
And then there's this heartbreaking story.
The 20-year-old father never left her side until he was forced to give her to adoptive parents this week after Kaylee's mother decided to put her up for adoption. In order to keep Kaylee, Colby needed to file paternity action, an affidavit, and a commencement notice with Utah's Vital Records a day before the mother signed the adoption papers relinquishing her rights.
This guy also got his kid back, by the way. I wonder why Cassie Jaye never brings that up.
Oh, hold on. I had to unmute.
But if it was the mother, would we expect her to fill out all those forms and have an affidavit of support and all of that? I kind of doubt it.
Yeah, and also I'd like to know what the timing was on him getting his kid back, because I looked up this article, and the story happened in 2015. Cassie Jaye was working on the movie in 2015. So it's possible that, like the story with the other gentleman, the one that, you know, we go into a little bit later, that he could have gotten custody, or like not custody, he got visitation. He could have gotten that after the movie was either in the editing process or done, but had not been put out yet. So I think that Big Joel implying that Cassie Jaye intentionally left that out is a little bit, let's say, that's a bit disingenuous. I don't think that that's cool, and I don't think that you should be. I wouldn't do that, because it's important to look at the timing of this. It took Cassie Jaye a while to make the movie. It's not a big company, and there was a lot of editing and stuff involved, and a lot of stuff that had to go on the cutting room floor. And, you know, even another story that was the I forget the guy's name, but he gets his son back, but it happens after the film is out. And so Cassie Jaye is not being disingenuous, because at the time they were apart. So, and also, again, why did this happen? This is like, you know.
I don't think these men are oppressed, because I don't think that's what oppression is. But I do think that they are being uniquely affected by it because they're men. Yeah. Because like I said, a mother wouldn't have to fill out a whole bunch of forms to claim a child.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So. Exactly. All right, let's keep going.
That up. Anyway, the point is, this non-consensual adoption thing is very rarely an issue. You don't see it happening a lot, and it doesn't mean the adoption process is broken or that it's biased against men. One more example. Toward the beginning of this section, Fred Hayward talks about how his wife duped him into having a baby.
My son's mom wanted to have children with me, and I had always refused, you know, saying, you have this anger problem, you need to get counseling, I'm not going to consider having children with you until that's dealt with, because she would lose her temper almost every day and just use any weapon she could. And like a child's the perfect weapon. So I was really definite about that. But she also used to proofread my articles for me. And I wrote an article for Playboy about Serpico. And when she read that, she told her friend she's going to trick me into fathering the child. She doesn't need my permission. And so that's how my son was conceived.
Now, this is an interesting example because, unlike the last two I talked about, it certainly does speak to a serious social issue. As far as the Center for Disease Control is concerned, what Hayward experienced there was a form of intimate partner violence known as controlling reproductive behavior.
All right, I'm just pausing for the banana. I let it go a little long. Hopefully this isn't going to bite us in the ass. But Fred Hayward this is the guy I was talking about. He did get reacquainted with his son, but it didn't happen until after Cassie Jaye got all her footage and started the editing process. We didn't learn that he got back with his son until the premiere, and it was announced there. And so sometimes you have to take into account that. But that doesn't mean, and this is important too, just because Fred Hayward got his son back, does not mean that wasn't an issue when it was going on. Because there are men who don't get their kids back. They never get to see them. And the way that we're handling child custody and father's rights and so on, it's definitely in need of an expanded conversation. A conversation that feminists, unfortunately, are not really for. Because their framework, the structure of the conversation, works from the presumption that men have power over women and they use it to keep them down. That is the de facto position. If you don't work from patriarchy as a model, that's not feminism. I don't care what you say. If you're not working from patriarchy and you call yourself a feminist, then you're not a feminist, because that is baked into it. Okay. So anyway, let's move on.
It's a surprisingly common thing. According to the CDC, around 8.7% of men report having been with a partner who tried to get pregnant when they didn't want that. And the numbers are around the same for women. Around 8.6% of them report similar things. This phenomenon presents an enormous problem for our justice system. It's hard to prove that contraception was used coercively, and it's difficult to classify what crime that actually is. Other governments are starting to look more closely at the issue, though. Around 2 years ago, in Canada, a case was brought to their Supreme Court about this stuff. A man trying to keep his relationship together poked holes in his condoms and got his girlfriend pregnant.
I'm just pausing for the banana. Okay. Jojo's on our lap, or on Lindsay's lap right now. He wants all this attention. He doesn't like that we're doing a video, I guess. So we're not giving him an attention. All right, moving on. Yeah. Oh, Xerix gives us $5 and says, can you mention when Joel put out his video and when the red pill released? I want Joel to be measured by the same ruler he measures Cassie. Big Joel's video came out on May 18th, 2018. Part 2 did. So I guess one can assume that part 1 was, earlier, but not like a lot earlier. So yeah, it was in May of 2018 that it happened. Thank you, Zaranx, for the $5. Okay, moving on.
The court ruled that the man had violated consent, and he was sentenced to 18 months in jail, and I think that's a very good thing. I hope America develops a similar infrastructure for dealing with cases like this.
Except that when women do that, they don't go to jail. I haven't seen any. Can you provide any cases where a woman lied to a man about her fertility, poked holes in the condom, extracted sperm from the condom after it was thrown out, or just lied about being on the pill just so that she can take him for 18 months or 18 years, I'm sorry, or whatever it is she wanted to do it for, force him to stay with her, whatever. I don't think that there's a penalty for it. And the worst part is, actually, and this is on men in a way, is that even if there was, the problem is that men don't tend to want to take women to jail for that or take them to court for that. Maybe they don't think they can. Maybe they feel like some obligation to raise their children or whatever. But there could be other nuances to it, let's say. But that doesn't remove the fact that this does happen. I don't know that women go to jail for fertility shenanigans. So I'm open to being proven wrong, but I'd like to see it. So yeah, the man went to jail, sure. But have women gone to jail for the same thing? That's what I want to know.
It would help both men and women. But even as Fred Hayward's story refers back to a well-documented and poorly dealt with problem, it doesn't feel like that's all the movie wants to show us. Hayward talks to Jaye about how his wife got inspired to abuse him through her reading of his men's rights article.
Okay, go ahead.
Did you hear what he said? It doesn't feel like that's what the movie wants.
Yeah. He's trying to like imply that the movie has another message. This is another thing that I see a lot from people. They try to read between the lines a lot, and you know, it's par for the course, but that's irrelevant. Like, before we get into reading between the lines, try responding to what's actually being said, and then work from there. How about that? You have something else to add? No. Okay.
And later on, Cassie Jaye shows us a really gross, unfortunate clip of the Wendy Williams show.
My friends think I should trick him and stop taking my birth control.
Men have never been in control of our bodies. We're the ones in control. Clap if you think that she should trick him. My people.
Through these scenes, the film expresses two feelings, even though it doesn't say them out loud. First, this is stuff that men and only men face. It is a representation of the ways that men are uniquely oppressed in America when it comes to the reproductive process.
Okay, well, help me understand something. First of all, this is a movie about men's issues, men's problems, and the men's rights movement. And Cassie Jaye is exploring the issues, okay? How could women be affected by this issue? Like, when you see this Wendy Williams clip that was on daytime television, network television, audience of millions, and Wendy Williams didn't lose her job, nothing, no blast, no blowback from this whatsoever. The women in the audience were cheering for it, okay? The idea that is being put out that Cassie Jaye is seeing, because she probably saw this before and didn't think anything of it, and then saw it in a new light after the movie was, you know, being made. Because according to Cassie's testimony, she didn't actually question her own feminism until she was in the editing process, okay? How can you see that scene from the Wendy Williams thing and not think, holy shit, that is messed up, that women would cheer for another woman to trick a man to stay with him or to have a family?
He calls it unfortunate.
He just says, yeah, it's an unfortunate clip. Almost like it's
unfortunate.
It's inconvenience.
Do you remember the clip of like Kelly Osbourne? Like, I don't know, it was on some talk show.
It was on the talk.
Where it was funny to like cut off a man's penis or something
and throw
like
it in the garbage disposal.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that was unfortunate as well.
Yeah, that was also unfortunate. Can you imagine like the gender reverse?
I know, and the gender reverse of this, even if one was was possible.
I don't even think it's possible.
There's no way, but like, there's no way this would happen. And the point is, Joel, what you should be thinking about now. I'm surprised that you're not talking about this, considering that, you know, you're such a smart guy. That this is on network TV, and people are cheering for this. Women, right? And what's the core message that Wendy Williams is putting out? The core message is men have never been in control of women's bodies. But what's happening is a woman is using her body to control a man.
Yeah,
and all the women are cheering for it.
He's controlled by it, no matter if they stay together.
Yeah,
or
because
not.
he has no options.
If he leaves, he's still gonna have to pay child support.
Exactly.
So
like, how is this not, like, how do you not see that?
How do you see that uniquely, like a thing that
and
affects
then,
men? Like,
yeah,
I don't understand.
Like, how do you not see that as something that uniquely affects men? And then on top of that, your takeaway is, well, you know, this is just like an unfortunate clip that she's using to sort of like create a, what is it, to create a bias? Is to get people to think about, to influence people away. Like this isn't a zero-sum game. This thing about men's issues and women's, it's not a zero-sum game, man. Women have issues, but there are multi-billion-dollar organizations and lobbying groups that are constantly drilling us with those issues. Men have issues, and like we're literally just like people in our houses on our computers trying to talk about it, and you want to take shots at us. That's interesting. And men's issues are not being addressed in the way that we think they should be, because the primary framework by which people discuss gender is feminism, and that is not a complete framework. It is incorrect straight away. Okay? It's not the way you can talk about it. And I'm sorry, you're making it really hard for me to stay polite, so I'm going to keep going now.
Second, women are the problem. They are the ones, the only ones trapping people in pregnancy. They are the ones taking advantage of a system that has no way to punish them. There is a...
Because the reason is because the system allows them to do it. Nobody's saying that women are evil. What we're saying is the system exists, and the not just the system, the legal system, but the culture encourages this behavior in women. It encourages this behavior. So it when they misbehave and there's no accountability and there's nothing that tells them, that corrects them, then you're going to get more of this behavior. So it's not necessarily that women are the problem. It's that the system is the problem. Like the family court system is a problem because it puts a loaded gun in the room that only a woman can use against a man. The same is true of this.
And I mean, if you're an equality feminist, then you should care, shouldn't you?
Yeah, you should be like, well, women shouldn't be using their body against men while claiming that men don't have power over them. See, that's a zero-sum game approach, is that men have never controlled this, but women can control men, right? And they should, and cheers from the audience. Like, don't you think, you don't see what's wrong with that? The system makes, the system enables women to behave badly. And so women behave badly. It's not that women are bad. It's that the system enables that. And I think the reason why you're struggling with this is because if you believe in patriarchy theory, that is the opposite of patriarchy theory, isn't it? All right. Anyway, let's move on.
Persistent toxic narrative among women that they are entitled to male bodies and to the children those bodies can help produce.
Because the system enables that in them. I mean, that is what is being displayed. We see it all the time.
And if we look at the other examples I brought up, we can see how these feelings pervade this section of the film. Jaye shows us those adoption articles, right? But of course, those aren't meant to get at some big social issue. There is no big social issue there to get at. Rather, these stories are there to remind the audience that women control children and that they use that power maliciously against men.
Again, I'm pausing for the banana, but I just want to say that, again, I got to reiterate, because he's reiterating. It's not that women do that because it's in their nature to be evil. It's that women can do that. And so you will have cases where they do. That's it. If there was no way for that to be exploited, I imagine that women would stop exploiting it. That's all. That's being as charitable as possible.
Or look at Harry Crouch's story again. That story isn't meant to get us thinking about paternity fraud legislation. If he wanted us thinking about that, he would have talked about it in at least some detail. No, his story is simple. It's about a cruel woman who stepped out. It's about the process through which a woman can make a man the worst thing an MRA can imagine. A cuck. So here...
Hold on. I think that was a little bit disingenuous as well.
I think so.
I don't know if it's... Well, see, you're working from the assumption that MRAs are the kind of people who go around calling everybody cucks. I mean, I've used it to make fun of people, but frankly, cuckolding is something that men generally don't want. Men in general, not MRAs, men. Men generally do not want to raise kids that are not theirs. That is not a controversial thing to say. I mean, it's not. Like, most men want their biological children.
Especially if they don't know.
Especially if they don't know. Yeah. I mean, like, look, and if cuckolding is your thing, then that's great, but most men don't want that. And we shouldn't, like, again, what are you trying to say? It sounds like, and I don't want to get into your head too much here, but I've heard, because of the timing of when this came out, I know a lot of people on, there was a lot of people, I think it was an alt-right thing to call everybody cucks. And I think that you're maybe trying to connect us to the alt-right. And I hope that that's not the case. And if it isn't, then...
I think you're reading too far into it.
No, I think to say that, I think that's intentional. I think nobody just says that and says the worst thing an MRA can imagine is being a cuck. I think that is an intentional statement. I'm not going to let that one slide. Because that's a weird thing.
Intentional, but I wouldn't say that. Oh, he's connecting you to the alt-right because you're an MRA. I don't know. I wouldn't go that far.
I was just told on Twitter that the MRM has ties to the Nazi movement.
No, I know, but that's more of a recent thing, I think.
I don't know. Well, maybe I'm reading into it too much, guys. I don't know. Let me know. Let's move on though. We might go over because I'd rather do this live than not, personally.
The film replaces any kind of systematic critique with a monolithic and careless narrative of male persecution. And the clearest place we can see that is when Jaye has a monologue about reproductive issues. This was a turning point in my experience of the film, so we're just gonna watch the whole thing.
I decided to create a flowchart of what I thought father's options might be following a surprise pregnancy.
I just want to say before we get into it, Cassie Jaye refers to these as options for the father. Options. Not power.
I then put a green line for the paths that I thought would be good turnouts for the father, and I put red lines for the paths that seemed to not be good for the father. Then I created a flowchart for women's options, and did the same with green and red lines. And as I stepped back, I saw all the red lines for the women's options if she does not want the child. But something dawned on me. Of every path the biological father could go down, he's at the mercy of the woman's sole discretion. Although women have very difficult choices to make, she at least has the choice.
Okay, so first off, this is the moment when I started to have pretty big doubts that Jaye was ever a feminist, or at least ever a thoughtful feminist. She said,
all right, I'm pausing here for the banana as well. So Joel starts to question that Cassie Jaye was ever a feminist. I just want to point out that you might want to look at Cassie Jaye's earlier films. She had one that was about, I want to say it was like arranged weddings in like Mormon or highly religious societies.
Oh, yeah.
And one about gay marriage. And she's also currently working on a documentary about miscarriages. So Cassie Jaye is not an MRA. She never claimed to be. She just gave us the one shot that no other journalist or documentarian ever did. And that was to actually try to look at it dispassionately and deal with the issues. And for that, I commend her tremendously. But if she never made another Red Pill movie or anything that explored the manosphere again, I wouldn't have a problem with it. But that does not mean that she was never a feminist. You can see that in her other movies. So I would suggest you watch them. They're older than this. And unless Cassie Jaye has a time machine, she can't go back and lie about her past.
Yeah, this is just his start of like, oh, you're wrong because women have it worst type of thing. He never says those words, but
yeah,
he basically shows like how women have it worse because abortion rights and stuff.
Yeah. Let's go on.
He says women may have tough choices, but at least they have a choice. But, like, there's a whole lot of women in America who don't have a choice in whether or not they will have a child.
A whole lot is kind of a wishy-washy number.
You always have a choice unless you're raped.
Yeah, women, even, like, if the only choice that matters is the abortion, then there are women that don't have as many options, but they have lots of options. There's a morning after pill, there's birth control, there's abstinence, there's multiple, 17, I think it's 17 different types of birth control. And yeah, even poor women can have access. I live in the west side of Chicago, a very low income area, and there are plenty of women getting abortions over here. I mean, yes, there are areas that is tougher, but that discussion isn't necessarily about women's bodies. That discussion is about the baby's body. And that's a whole other thing. The pro-life, pro-choice thing, that's a different discussion. But to frame it as it's something that is a women's rights issue, might be a bit misleading.
It's so annoying too, because it's about like asking, is a baby a human yet, and does the human, if it is,
does it have rights
yet?
Yeah,
that's the main question. And like the fact that most people that are pro-life are women, it makes you wonder.
Yeah, and I think
it makes me wonder.
It's an important thing to point out. And again, just because Cassie Jaye says women have choices and men are at the complete mercy of the mother of the child, okay, does not mean that women don't have struggles. What it's interesting because this is a film about men's issues that's trying to drill down on men's issues, and you're still trying to make it about women. The abortion discussion, that's happening. That is everywhere. Everywhere. Okay? The men's issues part of it, only in parts of the internet like this. It's a very small number of people talking about it, and you still want to move it away from the humongous discussion around abortion. It's like the ocean. It's like a drop in the ocean. And you're still like not pleased because Cassie Jaye is not a true feminist because she's not, pro-choice 100%. She is pro-choice. She said it herself. She is, that's her position. Anyway, she's still a registered Democrat. Not that necessarily makes you a feminist, but I think to a degree it does. All right. Well, anyway, let's move on.
Poor women, especially those living in red states, often find it impossible to get an abortion. There are numerous regulations that state governments have put in place to make them harder to access, and there are 5 states that literally only have 1 clinic. This isn't some obscure issue. Female reproductive rights problems are something that most people know about, so for Jaye to presuppose every woman's right to choose is frankly disturbing. But what's more, I find this line super interesting because it totally goes against everything the film was arguing for earlier. See, in its first section, the red pill makes one argument very clearly.
I'm pausing for the banana, and this is a good one too, so.
That just having a choice isn't inherently liberating.
A cab driver who was driving a cab 70 hours a week was not saying, I am earning this money to have power over my wife. He was earning this money even though it took power away from his life.
Yes, men are free to choose more kinds of jobs than women are. They have a greater power to become construction workers and coal miners and soldiers. But within the movie's logic, that's not necessarily a positive thing.
More choices to be a construction worker. If you're able-bodied, I think you could be a construction worker even if you're a woman.
Well, there are female construction workers, but I think that the what Warren Farrell is saying is like, when men they choose the riskier jobs, the more dangerous jobs.
That was what Warren Farrell was saying, but he's saying like you have men have more choices.
Yeah, because
more dangerous jobs. I thought he meant because they're more physically able.
No. Well, I think that is part of it, but I think that what he's saying is that he's building a case for something, but I want to let the whole clip play out and then we'll reiterate the case. I'm just pausing for the banana right now.
All right.
Those jobs are physically taxing after all, and sometimes they're dangerous. But here, in Cassie Jaye's monologue, that entire logic, a logic that was so important to the first act, gets thrown out the window. Women get to choose what happens to babies, and so they are the privileged class. There's no consideration of the fact that women being obliged to take care of children might impact them negatively sometimes. The film never discusses how women are more likely to be single parents, how single parents are more likely to be poor, how the burden of being a primary caretaker isn't always fun. It's work. Hard, taxing work.
Oh, okay. So now we got the whole picture. So what he's saying is that he thinks that Cassie Jaye is being a hypocrite or inconsistent, or otherwise not making. She's like backing out of an argument that was made earlier. So men chose jobs that were more dangerous and riskier because they were basically making the choices they thought were best for their family. And Warren Farrell was making the point that just because men have these choices doesn't necessarily mean it's good, because they're more likely to take the more dangerous jobs. But the fact is, those jobs have to be done, right? And men are more likely to do it because they want to provide for their families, And then what he says here is that Cassie Jaye is changing the narrative around women's choices with regards to reproduction by saying that women are privileged because they have all of the options. However, a couple things to point out. In Cassie Jaye's, in the pregnancy, pregnancy childbirth thing, the reproductive discussion, women have choices, men don't have choices. So it doesn't mean that women are a privileged class. That's not an argument that Cassie Jaye is making, right? It's to say that men are disadvantaged in this. They don't have any options because everything is at the sole discretion of the mother. That doesn't make them a privileged class. When men choose more dangerous work, that is still a choice they're making, even if it means they don't get to see their family much, even if it puts them at greater risk or whatever. But that doesn't mean that women are losing anything. So when a man chooses to work a more dangerous job so that his wife can stay home with the kids, then he is providing her with the freedom to raise those children without having to worry about finances. If they're basically sharing an income, he's going to compensate more. And this is something that women generally want too. So if you want to address that, you're going to have to address women on that. You're going to have to talk to them and ask them to change their standards. Unfortunately, that's what women want, and unfortunately, that's what men are prepared to give.
I still don't understand his argument. He clarifies it even more later, but I still don't understand it.
What is it?
So we're coming right up on it because it's at 15:12.
Okay, I'm gonna keep going then.
Essentially, then, the red pill wants to have its cake and eat it too. When it comes to men, choices can be bad when they lead to negative outcomes, and so they represent male oppression. When it comes to women, though, choices are an unquestioned good regardless of the outcome, and so they also represent male oppression.
I really don't understand what he's saying.
Because he thinks that, again, this goes back to Cassie Jaye's thing about reproduction. Because everything is at the sole discretion of the mother, men are oppressed by it. And when men have to work dangerous jobs to feed their families and keep a roof over their head, that also puts men in the disadvantaged position. Because Bane is in the chat. I sent you a message, Bane, on Skype. I wanted you to know if you wanted to come on and talk about this this part 2 video, unless you're already working on one. But the point is,
I hope you are.
The framework is not men are oppressed. This is, again, another time he brings this up. Not claiming that men are oppressed, saying that men have problems, and saying that the system has problems that affect men uniquely is not the same as saying that men are oppressed. We don't play that game of somebody has power over someone else. We think that in general, everyone's got a shit sandwich in some capacity. And to just open up the conversation to say, hey, men also have problems that are unique to men, just as women have problems that are unique to women. That's all it is. So
But,
Joel is
okay,
okay. Go ahead.
So
Yeah,
the
yeah.
part that I really don't understand is like, so he's saying that Cassie Jaye is saying that men are oppressed by the dangerous jobs they choose.
Yes,
Okay.
but they're not.
No.
No, because a man wouldn't say that.
I've been oppressed by heavy labor.
Yeah, like, men are choosing those jobs because they're trying to do what's best. Like they do it because they love their families. It's
or
not.
they like to do it. Like they might have an adventurous spirit and they want to be a construction worker, a landscaper, or a soldier.
But that doesn't mean that those jobs cease to be dangerous just because men choose to do it.
No.
Right. And that doesn't mean that there isn't a reward that men get out of it, high risk, high reward job, I guess, that they find attractive because women find it attractive. Like that, like, again, you look, men's choices do not happen in a vacuum. Women are affected by them. So when men choose to work jobs, they're doing it because, in part, they are trying to attract a woman. And a woman can become attracted to a man that has a certain kind of job because of the security and the comfort that it can provide her. And I'm just talking in generalities here, but this is just the way it is.
Yeah.
And so to pretend like this is all a power struggle, like I don't think the sexes are in a power struggle. I think that feminists see it that way, but MRAs don't see it that way. We know that men and women are trying to coexist, and the problems that men and women face typically are systemic from the state and from lobbyists and activist types, or they come in a cultural way. And I think the cultural stuff is a lot harder. It's like basically increasing the compassion for men and the respect for women. And when I say respect for women, I don't mean respect women. I mean their accountability.
Respect.
Treat them like as people that are worthy of earning respect. And that means holding them responsible for stuff that they do.
Yeah, but look, one thing I wanted to point out is I think men do have more pressure to get a paying job of any type,
Absolutely.
even if it's heavy labor, because they're less likely to rely on their partner to support them.
Absolutely. Yeah, so, because women will women
generally
don't put up with that.
Can be are more likely to be dependent on their spouse. Just in general, not all.
Not all, but that is a common thing. And you might say, well, that feminism is working to undo gender roles, but yeah, you gotta ask women to go against what is in their nature. And I mean, I welcome that, but you gotta start asking women to do it and see what they do.
Men are not being oppressed by hypergamy, but
no,
hypergamy is real.
Yes.
That's what I'll say.
Okay, let's keep going.
Because these bits of logic are mutually contradictory, we're forced to see the film's arguments here as deeply unstable. The movie doesn't care about choice. It doesn't care about presenting choices as complicated things that can be either positive or negative. All it cares about is the conclusion. Men are disadvantaged on every level. Everything else is just a tool to get us to that conclusion.
How did you get to that conclusion?
Yeah, that's
what I want to know.
They're not saying that. Just, it's weird. You're doing the thing that Alison's talked about, which is the negative sum game. When someone says men have problems, people, and then that means that, these issues are not unique to women, people think of it as, oh, so you're saying that men are disadvantaged in every single way. And when Cassie Jaye is trying to make a movie that only talks about men's issues, while also acknowledging that women have issues, your conclusion is she's not talking about women's issues enough in a movie about men's issues. Therefore, she doesn't believe women have issues and that men are the only ones that have issues. Like, how? Okay, moving on.
To make us feel like that conclusion has been earned, even if it requires intellectual laziness or a one-sided emotional rhetoric. So, with all this in mind, let's jump forward to...
Oh, okay.
A one-sided emotional rhetoric.
Yeah, that sounds like projection. It's almost like the entire discussion about gender up until this movie came out was a one-sided emotional rhetoric made up of phony statistics. Sorry, I'm being rude now. Okay, moving on.
To the next and last major argument that the film makes, that men face sexual assault and intimate partner violence that people don't care enough about. The movie spends a lot of time and energy discussing this issue. We can see it as the emotional centerpiece of the film, and I think that's for very good reason. Men do face intimate partner violence and sexual assault, and more than that, these issues don't see enough attention. For all intents and purposes.
Just pausing there to say thank you for acknowledging that. Yes, men face physical assault, emotional assault, other forms of abuse all the time. It's true. And yeah, it's a thing. So thanks for acknowledging that, Joel.
This section should have been a home run, but considering the last 30 minutes of me talking about the film, it should be no surprise that things get a bit more complicated than that. What I'm going to do here is zoom in on this 30-minute passage and see how its arguments proceed from each other. There's probably enough interesting stuff here to justify a whole other video part, but at this point I have to write about something that isn't the red pill in my lifetime, so here we go. The section starts with portraits of roughly 5 men describing their experiences with...
Again, I'm just pausing for the banana. Sorry about that. Okay.
Intimate partner violence and sexual assault. This man was abused when he was a child. This man's wife abused him. This man knows a guy who was abused and who the system failed.
So I called a bunch of domestic violence shelters. I just looked around online and I called, but every place that I called said, we don't help men.
I don't have any problem with these interviews. In fact, I'd say that if the film has any saving grace, it's that it provides survivors a place to talk about their experiences. Here, we have the first claim that the section wants to make. Men are abused, and it's a problem. So far, so good. There's not...
Again, thank you for acknowledging that. Yeah, men are abused too. So, I think that it's almost like you can't make an argument against that. You just can't. But I think the but is coming.
There's not a lot of people who would disagree with that, and neither would I. After this, Cassie Jaye has a short monologue where she starts to position male abuse as a systemic issue.
In the United States, there are over 2,000 domestic violence shelters. All of them serve female victims, and nearly all of them turn away male victims. 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men will be victims of physical violence by an intimate partner in their lifetime. Sure, there's a slight majority of female victims, but how can that excuse denying men help? Couldn't this be considered gender discrimination?
Her main citation here is that even though men and women face similar problems with intimate partner violence, women benefit from the 2,000 abuse shelters in America, while men have fewer places to go to in these situations.
They have one place. One that they can go to. Otherwise, they end up in hotels or homeless shelters and stuff like that. Okay, so I got some super chats I need to read. Zeranx gives us $5 and says, Reverse Jordan Peterson, you know Big Joel is correct in pursuing a low-resolution image. In doing so, he can avoid the work of digging deeper. French Honey Badger gives us $5 and says, either you can abort in an abortion plex or you have absolutely no choice. Hey dude, can you be thrown into jail if you don't want to the bay as a woman? Tyler Preston gives us $5 and says, Big Joel purposely ignored Aaron Pitsey just because he didn't agree with her about women being equally as abusive as men. Yeah, that part gets left out, interestingly enough. And that's the thing that I guess is one of the most irritating things. See,
I wanted to ask you this. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
Mid-sentence. Does he include in the first part the Karen clip where she talks about Boko Haram?
No.
Because it's not in this one either, I don't think.
No, he doesn't bring that up.
Because I think that was pretty powerful.
That's the moment everyone gets the most out of. Big Joel, did you address the Boko Haram story and all of the ways in which the media reports on male death, to put it bluntly, and the issues with just like whenever there's a calamity or catastrophe of some kind, that male deaths are erased in that, which is a huge part of the problem, right? It's the way that we view male suffering. And this isn't something that men made. I saw in a comment that someone said that the weird thing is that what MRAs take issue with is a system that was made by men. See, that's what I'm talking about when I say feminists can't talk about men's issues, because feminists believe in patriarchy theory. And patriarchy theory says that everything is the work of men. Patriarchy built all of this. The way that we communicate, the way that we do everything, the way that we operate in the world, right? So that means that if you make men the super agents of the world, then how can you feel compassion for them when they die or suffer if they are the ones in power? And when you put everything in the framework of power structure, as opposed to what it's always been, which is essentially a cooperative structure between men and women. We did this, right? But you can't see it that way, and I think that's the challenge. It's a big challenge that feminists have to get over, is to stop seeing this as, a zero-sum game and stop seeing it as patriarchy. If you can get that out of your head, then we can actually start talking about men's issues. But you're not going to be able to if you see everything as, how do women have it worst? How do women suffer uniquely in this instance? That is the problem. Say something else? Okay.
In some ways, I think this argument is pretty reductive. It's very easy to look at the CDC statistics and conclude that male and female intimate partner violence is roughly the same, and so we should handle them in the same way. But ultimately, that assertion fails to get at a few important intricacies. Abuse doesn't express itself in the same way across gender lines. While it's true that things like controlling reproductive behavior and emotional abuse are perpetrated in roughly equal amounts by men and women, patterns of dangerous and life-threatening behavior are more commonly experienced by women. In a 2000...
I'm just pausing there for the banana. He's going to go into a study that shows, I think, that women... Well, we'll get into it. I'll just play the clip.
Study by the Center of Policy Research, they found that 4.5% of women reported being sexually assaulted by a partner in their lifetime, where the number is 0.2% for men. They found that 20.4% of women were physically assaulted, while the number is 7% for men. And as we approach the most life-threatening forms of abuse, the numbers become more starkly different.
Oh, okay, I want to stop here for a second. So basically what he's saying is it's worse for women. But you have to understand that this is what people reported. If men are less likely to report abuse, and also, even if they report abuse, they're less likely to, it's less likely to be taken as abuse. And they're more likely to be the ones arrested if they're the ones being abused, if they call the cops, right? So this data probably isn't complete. And I think it's a bit too dismissive to say, well, it's worse for women here, when everything is stacked against men in terms of not only their ability, their desire necessarily to report on it, which isn't just, by the way, it's not just because men don't want to be seen as weak, which I know is something that you get into a little bit later. It's not just that, though. If a man doesn't think that the system will take him seriously, he's not going to bother. If a man believes that he's going to get arrested when he calls, then he's not going to bother. He's just going to put up with it. And there is also the men that generally think that they can tolerate it because they have a higher tolerance.
Right.
Right?
And doesn't the movie actually go into the Duluth model and stuff?
Yeah, but he ignores that. He says it's a conspiracy theory. He dismisses it.
Oh.
He doesn't say, okay, let me put it this way.
It's nuanced,
He
guys.
doesn't, no. He
but,
doesn't say, I just want to get this out. He doesn't say the Duluth model is a conspiracy. He says the MRAs, one of the things that they use in their talking points are conspiracy theories. And then while saying that, he shows the Duluth model, the wheel. He puts that on the screen. So he doesn't say that that's it, but he shows that on the screen while saying that they believe in conspiracy theories. So go ahead.
From what I've seen recently, they're getting rid of the Duluth model in a lot of states and things like that.
Yeah, they're starting to. Yeah, it's all like
but it's not
people get shit done. Yeah.
But anyway, what I was gonna ask you is, did he also show like the circumcision stuff?
Nope, didn't show that.
Because like that's a pretty powerful point that the MRM has too. Like, I mean, there's no female genital mutilation that's legal.
He may, but I mean, he may have said it in the first half, but I don't.
Okay.
If he did, though, here's the thing, though. If he did, the framework around it had more to do with no, he didn't talk about it. But if he did, I imagine that what he would have said is something about how it's a Christian thing and not a man thing. Because you know, or a Jewish thing, but I don't think that it would have been okay for him to say that, you know, like brackets, circumcision, brackets. Okay, so anyway,
in the U.S., I think it's just a thing.
No, in the U.S. it is just a thing, but he would say it's a carryover of Christian tradition or something like that, you know. But you know what? That's the thing, though. Like, everything has to be a pivot away from this is a men's issue. No, it's not. That's a race issue. This is a men's issue. No, it's not. That's a capitalism issue. This is a men's issue. No, it's not. It's a poverty issue. It's a class issue.
In the U.S., circumcision is definitely a men's issue. Or genital mutilation, period, is a men's issue because only males.
It's only legal to do it to men. But not just here in the U.K., in a lot of Western countries. It's legal. So, anyway, let's move on.
Let's make circumcision legal.
Yeah, let's watch how fast it all goes away, right? Yeah.
I'm joking.
No, I know.
Women are astronomically more likely to get beat up or be choked. None of this stuff contradicts the CDC's findings, mind you.
And by the way, even if that's true, does that justify only one male shelter and none of the other ones allowing men in? Does that actually justify that? Because, like, women use weapons and, you know, they poison their men, they drug them, they do all kinds of stuff. They can. The point is, again, you're going into the whole, like, let's get into the nuance and, like, what are the numbers? But we're just like, here's an issue, it's not being addressed in a way that is fair, proportionate. And the fact that there is some changes happening shows that most people also agree with this. You said the Duluth model is starting to change. You know, I know that the NCFM is doing a lot of great work. Yes, MRAs do things, right?
Yeah, they're the ones that have started turning the draft, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it hasn't actually happened yet.
But it's happening. There's a discussion. It's an in progress thing. The draft could change. The Duluth model starting to change. You know, there are changes. Like the Innocence Project has gotten a lot of guys who have been wrongfully convicted. Most of them for like rape or sexual assault. They have been, they've gotten out of jail, even though a lot of them have spent a great deal of time before this happened. There's a lot of good work that's happening, but you know, MRAs don't ever accomplish anything. Also, while we've been doing a lot of good for men, we haven't been able to oppress any women at the same time. So we're not really doing everything we should be doing. Okay, sorry, I'm being really snarky. I don't mean to. Sorry, Joel.
No, he means it.
Women are not perfect. They're sometimes abusive to men, but
it's not. See, again, that's a bit diminishing. Look.
Yeah, do you want to see?
Sometimes.
Do you want to see?
Sure.
The sentencing gap between men and women. You wanna check that out?
I mean,
no big deal or anything.
Oh God.
I mean, I don't know. Maybe it isn't. Maybe we're just gynocentric, and that's just the way it is.
What's really frustrating is when someone is using a candor that is so soft and polite. It's like the Mr. Rogers, but what they're saying is so infuriating that you like this can like look. This can really bum me out because this guy he's coming up on 200,000 subs. And the comment section under this video is all in support of what he's saying. And our channel, Badger Livestreams, which is the one that really has the most activity, we're only at like 7,000. I'm not going to be able to reach that many people with this video. And it really does bum me out because that narrative that he's putting out there will persist. Because like it's, you know, he's getting boosted by Google, and we know that that's true. More people are gonna see that video because they're gonna help him, and that's only gonna make it exponential.
And therefore, there's going to be people who won't even watch the movie.
No, I think the people that watch Big Joel's video and like it and all that, I think they're people that don't want to watch the movie and they're just like, yeah, this is what I thought it was going to be about.
Yeah, I guess so.
That's just my opinion. I don't know. But...
Yeah. All right, well, anyway, let's keep going. A little bit longer, and then I'm going to have to quit and go into the after show.
The experience of being in danger with someone you're living with, a situation that necessitates having an immediate place to go, is something that's seen by many more women than men. All that said, I can't be too mad at this claim. Like, I'm not opposed to male abuse shelters or to abuse shelters that accept men. While I do think the movie understates the reasons why there are more shelters for women, that doesn't mean we shouldn't develop an infrastructure for men who face these issues. And if the movie had stopped here, there's a good chance that I wouldn't be writing any of this right now. But after the discussion of the asymmetry in abuse shelters, Cassie Jaye, with the help of the other Red Pill participants, comes to the following conclusion.
All right, I'm just pausing here for the banana. This is like, I think this will be the last thing we'll respond to, and then we'll go into the after show. So it'll be in the Direhawk's Den, feedthebadger.com, start a monthly subscription, and yeah, just do that, and then be a part of the after show where we'll watch the rest of this and respond to it in kind. So
why aren't men's rights activists and feminists working together? Michael Kimmel briefly said something that made me wonder. He said it would no longer be a gender problem if both men and women were equally victims of domestic violence.
Okay, I'm pausing here because I have to say something to that. I think that is what Michael Kimmel said is absolutely what feminists believe. This is the negative sum game. Alison's already talked about it. If you take an issue and you've always framed it as something that is unique to women, then the support will outpour. You'll get support from all over. Corporations, individuals, whatever. Everyone will come out. The lobby will grow in power and influence, okay? If it's about women. But if it is discovered that that is not a gendered issue, people will be less sympathetic to the issue on the whole because men are a part of the issue. It will suddenly become a smaller issue. This is the reason why the Boko Haram story is so powerful. Because when the boys died, right, the Islamists they kept killing boys and they didn't get the response they wanted, which was essentially the attention. They wanted attention from the government, right? And they weren't getting it by killing boys. So they didn't even kill them. They kidnapped girls. And all of a sudden, the whole world took notice. And they realized that that's how you get attention. And up until that moment, all those boys had died. All those men who had died before meant nothing. Because no one even looked into it before that. Right? So Vercingetorix says, kill boys, I sleep. Right. Kidnap girls. What was it? What is it? Real shit? Yeah, that's it. Kidnap girls, real shit. Okay, so let's keep going. I want to hear Joel's response to this.
Is that why the number of male victims are never addressed?
The treatment of male abuse has been concealed by feminism. There is a vested interest that gynocentrists have in pretending that men are not abused.
Okay, so he says the word gynocentrists like that's an ideology. That's just the way that we work as human beings. We are naturally gynocentric. That means that we tend to prioritize women, and there's biological precedent, evolutionary precedent for it. And Big Joel, you're doing it yourself in this video. In your responses, you are trying to find ways, not necessarily to dismiss Cassie Jaye's arguments or claims, or even the MRM's claims, but male suffering. You're dismissing it by making it not issues that are unique to men, but rather they're issues that are as a result of other systems that you believe in. The Second Amendment, which, you think should be abolished. Capitalism, which you think is oppressive. Racism, whatever else it is. Men being effeminate, which is basically putting the focus back on women. And you're doing that because you don't want to see male suffering by itself. Because if you did, then female suffering would have less impact. And that would be harder to deal with. But I think that I have not known one MRA that has wanted to erase women's suffering and only talk about men's suffering, but rather to try to bring men's suffering into the picture while examining women's suffering in a way that is, let's say, less gynocentric. To say, okay, well, let's see in what areas, women have problems that are unique to them because they're women, and in the cases where they are, if it's something that is coming from men, right? Because that's the feminist claim. All women's suffering is something that happens because men do it to them, the men as a group, the patriarchy, and women can't do anything about it. So, do you want to say anything to this yet? No? Okay, let's keep going.
Put what Jaye says another way. If we started caring about men, feminism could no longer function. The world would take the red pill and feminist ideologies would come crashing down. I think this shift in argument is central to the entire film, so let's unpack it for a little while. The first thing we should notice is that if we look at this intimate partner violence argument as a whole, it kinda looks like each of the claims support each other. First, men are abused. Second, society is very poor at dealing with abused men. Third, feminism seeks to conceal the reality of male abuse. There's an emotional through line here, a sense of narrative closure. Like the conclusion we arrived at makes sense and is a necessary extension of where we've been and what we've seen. The fact is, though, those first two claims have literally nothing to do with the conclusion. The idea that feminism, the modern political movement in America, has been doing this really horrible thing to men is the sort of thing that would require a mountain of proof, and that proof is just not there. Where are these male abuse denying feminists at? Like, if feminists refuse to acknowledge that men get abused, you'd think we'd be able to notice since they'd be busy never talking about men getting abused and not caring why they're abused. But that doesn't seem true. I did a brief Google search and found all these articles that were written long before this movie came out.
I'm just pausing for the banana. There's actually a woman in this documentary that does that. And also, the absence of evidence in terms of like who's talking about this stuff compared to the opposite. Like, just look at the proportion. The proportion of men that are abused by women, and if we're just going to talk about the abuse issue, we can just talk about that. Look at how often women's abuse or domestic violence is framed as a women's issue versus how often it's framed as a men's issue versus how often it's framed as simply an issue, which is what the third option is the truth. Most couples that are, that are dealing with domestic violence, it is just because two people who are violent are attracted to each other in most cases. So like how does the media, the academia, the news, the social media, the internet, whatever, how do they talk about it? Do they talk about domestic violence like it's a men's issue, a woman's issue, or a non-gendered issue? That's the only question you need to ask.
There's an everyday feminism one called 7 Types of Abuse We Don't Take Seriously, which talks a lot about the problem of male abuse. And there's a Cosmopolitan article which gets at the issue too. I'm not saying these publications are the heights of scholarship, but see, that's kind of my point. If there was a conspiracy among feminists to act like male
nobody said it was a conspiracy. They just said that I don't think it's a conspiracy, like necessarily to hide male suffering. But I think it's really easy to just not talk about it. Or if you do talk about it, you talk about it in a way that blames men for it, aka toxic masculinity.
Yeah, I think you could argue the Duluth model is a conspiracy.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's the framework that this operates under, right? That's exactly it. Okay.
Abuse didn't exist, you'd think that these low-tier pop liberal sites would be the worst offenders, but they're not. They don't ignore these things, so who is? I guess this random feminist person in the movie does, but she hardly seems representative of a pattern.
On the
Okay, we're gonna listen to this clip. I'll tell you who this random feminist is.
whole issue of domestic violence, that's just another word, really. It's a cleanup word about wife beating, because that's
Okay, so this is Catherine Spillar. You can see she's the executive director of Feminist Majority Foundation and the executive director of Ms. Magazine. Not a random feminist. Executive director of Ms. Magazine and the executive director of Feminist Majority Foundation. That's not a random feminist. If Big Red has said that, you'd have some legs to stand on, because Big Red is just a random feminist. But this is not a random feminist. This is that is so laughable. Like, seriously.
that's really what it is.
Beyond that, the sorts of factors at play when it comes to male intimate partner violence are, like, very relevant to feminist discourse. See, there's a part of the Red Pill where the Honey Badgers, a group of female anti-feminists, talk about male abuse.
This is not flattering to men, to talk about men's vulnerabilities.
No.
To talk about the ways that they are not strong and that they are, well, weak. And to be honest about it, it's not flattering.
This is true, what they're saying here. I have no doubt that many men feel shamed into not reporting domestic violence because to do so would be to admit weakness and be seen as effeminate. But this idea isn't transgressive or meaningfully anti-feminist.
Okay. That's the last thing I'm going to respond to, because he's going to pivot into the toxic masculinity thing. Here's the thing, though. The context of what Alison was saying is not to make the argument for toxic masculinity. What Alison is talking about is why would women advocate for men, right? The truth is, it is hard for men to talk about their vulnerabilities. But the reason for it is not the toxic masculinity narrative, which is there's some, gender role that men have to be strong and they have to remain stoic no matter what and all of that, and that that it comes from other men telling them like how they should act. That's not what it is. It's because men generally have a higher tolerance for bullshit, and they also aren't necessarily concerned about how other men will see them. They're concerned with how other women will see them, because women don't like weakness in men. Let me ask you this. This is a question I've been thinking about a little bit. Why is it more men support feminism than women support men's rights? Why is that?
What?
Why is it there are more male feminists than female MRAs?
Because feminism is just the state of...
Well, I mean, even proportionately, though. Like, feminists always go on about how there aren't enough representatives, female representation in government, and, because that's the reason why women's rights aren't being dealt with. But the fact is, the majority of people in governments are feminists. Because they know, even the ones on the right, they have to defer to women because they want their votes, right? And that doesn't mean they're all phony either. Like, I'm sure there are a lot of them that believe that they really are feminists. And they don't have to be women. So I think there are a lot more men that are in support of women's rights than there are women in support of men's rights, because we as in general tend to see women as more valuable. And so we want to protect them.
Well, can you imagine a bunch of women funding like a men's domestic violence shelter?
Yeah.
Through their hard-earned cash, doing heavy labor jobs.
Right. And then, like, the reason why I think there are fewer female MRAs is because women in general find that idea laughable, because they don't have a lot of compassion for men's weakness. I don't think that they do. I don't think it's necessarily in their nature to do that. And that sounds like an edgy statement, but based on what I've seen, it takes a special kind of woman to be an MRA. And I think that they're unusual. People like Janice Fiamengo and Alison and Karen and Crystal and Lauren and Prim Reaper and so on. Those are unusual, and you. Those are unusual women.
I don't care about men.
But I'm saying, like, but men are way more likely to do that for women. And part of it is because they think that it will get them female approval, I think. But women don't have to do that for men. Yeah. So I like, that's a question you should ask. Alison was saying that because she knows that if women don't advocate for men's issues, no one will listen. And I would guarantee you that one of the reasons why this movie did well was because Cassie Jaye was a woman. And that is it got people interested and curious. And that is the degree to which women have social power, that they can literally get people talking. Karen's videos are, I want to say, like, every person I've spoken to, almost every person I've spoken to, that I said, how did you find yourself talking about these issues, whether you were talking about men's issues or you were an anti-feminist or just like a cultural liberal or whatever, most of them tell me Karen's videos. Sargon said that. Karen's videos changed him. How? Because, and it was as simple as this, because a woman decided to talk about men's issues. And people thought that was incredible. Because it was. But women talking about, like, men talking about women's issues, that's all the time. All the time. In fact, I think more men are talking about women's issues than men talking about their own issues. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Absolutely. So, all right. Well, anyway, I have to go, but is there anything that you wanted to say that maybe we didn't get a chance to listen to that you really wanted to respond to?
No, I think you covered most of it. I guess I just noticed a lot of things he left out, which I thought were, like, probably the best arguments for men, like, advocating for men's issues.
Yeah.
He kind of, like, he didn't really talk about them much, at least not in the second part, and I haven't seen the first part in a long time, so. Also, I hope Bane666 makes a video. Did I add a 6 in there?
666AU, yeah. Yeah, I'm sure that he will, but he's gonna have to do it in 2 parts, otherwise it's gonna be like a 2-hour fucking video, because the second video is a lot longer than the first one. But yeah, I mean, like, he goes into just sort of, it gets a little bit redundant, but you get the sense of it. I put a link to the original video so you can watch it in the low bar, and yeah, just, like, give us your thoughts on this stream. I really gotta go. I'm supposed to do a meeting in like 15 minutes, so the after show is gonna have to be moved up, and I will have the after show after the meeting. So if you want to be a part of the after show, you got to go to feedthebadger.com and start a monthly subscription. It'll get you into the Discord, and you'll be able to watch all the shows that, you know, that go on, the after shows, that is, and you'll also get, like, custom notifications and other goodies, and you'll be a part of the community, which is a great place to hang out. To do that, again, that's feedthebadger.com. And also, before I forget, International Conference on Men's Issues, August 16th, 17th, 18th. There's a sale going on tickets. You can get them as low as $69.99. I think, yep, $69.99 for a ticket. That's the lowest it gets. So consider that if you haven't been. Yeah, come on out to the ICMI 2019. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. Thanks for coming on. Please hit like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed, hit the bell for notifications, and leave us a comment and tell us what you think. Big Joel, if you're watching this, I want to offer a open invitation to come on and talk about this stuff, because I think that the only way we can get to the bottom of these issues is to talk to people on the other side. Because I think, honestly, we're both speaking, like, words that sound like English, but we're not talking the same language. And we need to drill down on that. So, open invitation to Big Joel if he wants to come on and talk. He did leave a comment on the other video, and he was he said that we misrepresented him on every point. So I don't want to do that again, and I'd rather just, like, talk to you directly. So Again, if you guys could leave us a comment, hit like, hit the bell for notifications, and subscribe. With that said, I want to thank Lindsey for coming on and hanging out with me, and I want to thank you guys for joining us on the Dogezerker, and I'll see you guys in the next show, whenever that is. And on the after show, I'll do it later, maybe like 8 or so Eastern time.
Do you want me to come on that one?
If you want to.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Talk to you guys later.